Hey everybody, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to give you my thoughts on the WWF/WWE B-PPV events from April 2001, which was Backlash, through February 2002, No Way Out. Let's start off with Backlash 2001, which was the first pay-per-view after WrestleMania 17 and after the sale of WCW to WWE. At the time, I considered this pay-per-view and the following pay-per-view, Judgment Day, to be lame duck pay-per-views. I was waiting for something to happen with the invasion, and to me these pay-per-views felt like they were just time fillers. And looking back on these pay-per-views again, not much has really changed. There's a few highlights here and there, but both pay-per-views overall, in my opinion, are very forgettable. Let's start off with Backlash 2001. The card was solid enough. I did enjoy the Hardcore Championship match between Rhino and Raven, both guys formerly from ECW, and it was one of Raven's better matches during this WWE run. William Regal versus Chris Jericho, the Duchess of Queensberry match, was just ridiculous. This was something straight out of Vince Russo, something that he would do. Basically, Jericho would have the match won, and then the Duchess would change the rules of the match and say, oh, it's a no DQ match now, or it's a no count-out match now. Very similar to stuff that Russo had done in WCW. Wasn't a big fan of this. The Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit 30-minute submission match was very good. It wasn't the best match between the two of them, in my opinion, but there's no such thing as a bad Benoit Angle match. So this was probably the match of the night. Shane McMahon versus The Big Show was just silly. Shane McMahon, as the new owner of WCW, he should have been going all out with the invasion. Instead, he's wrestling Big Show on a WWE pay-per-view. Why? Now, I guess the storyline was that Shane wanted Big Show in WCW since Show used to be in WCW, but he was going to stay with the WWE. He was going to stay loyal to Vince McMahon, so that set up Shane versus the Big Show. Just really weird. Not sure who you're supposed to cheer or boo for in this match, because Big Show's representing WWF and Shane's the outsider from WCW now, but at this time he was still being portrayed as a face. It was very confusing. The one highlight of the match was Shane doing his big 50 feet leap, whatever it was, off the top of the stage onto Big Show, and then Test interfered and helped get Shane up to answer the 10 count. That was really, literally, the only memorable moment in this match. Few other decent matches on here on the undercard. The main event, wasn't a big fan of it at all. The two-man power trip, Steve Austin and Triple H. Steve Austin had just turned heel at WrestleMania against the tag team champions, Undertaker and Kane. You know, I like the idea of all the titles being on the line and all the champions being in one match, but Austin as a heel wasn't working for me, and I felt it really hurt the match. And it felt, watching this match, like it was more about Triple H than anything else. And at the end, it was Triple H who got the win for his team. And, you know, Austin was almost a secondary player. This pay-per-view took place in Chicago, so it had pretty good crowd heat, but overall, wasn't a huge fan of the pay-per-view. To me, it was very forgettable. And next up, we had Judgment Day, which, in my opinion, was more of the same. Another lame duck pay-per-view, waiting for the invasion to get going. You had Chyna in her last WWF appearance. I believe this was her last match in WWE, her against Lita. Really weird storyline where Chyna was kind of acting like a heel, but when the match was over, she did beat Lita. She raised her hand or whatever and was acting all friendly with her, and Chyna's boob popped out in the match. That was really the most interesting thing in the whole match. You had the Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit ladder match, which I thought was really good, better than the Iron Man match the previous month. And then you had the angle with Edge and Christian coming out and interfering Angle, recruiting them to help him out. And, you know, this played into the other match later on the show where you had Chris Jericho and a mystery partner against Edge and Christian for the tag team titles. And you had Chris Jericho bring out Chris Benoit. Benoit was the mystery partner, and that would lead to the two of them working together. So this was a good storyline on this show, and Benoit losing the match to Angle, able to come back later and win the titles with Chris Jericho. So this was good stuff. Rikishi against William Regal, which was Rikishi turning babyface after that failed heel turn. And as it turns out, he got hurt in this match and would be gone for about 6 months. So, that's the only significant thing about the undercard, really. And then you had the two main event matches. Kane beating Triple H to win the Intercontinental title. Whatever. And then the main event, Austin versus Undertaker. I suppose if you're a fan of Austin and Undertaker, then you would enjoy this. But they had so many better matches against each other, in my opinion. I thought it could have been a lot better. And you just had tons of outside interference. The main storyline they were doing was teasing that there was going to be a split between Austin and Triple H. Triple H lost the match to Kane because of Austin accidentally hitting Triple H. And then later on you had Triple H coming out and doing the right thing and helping Austin, his teammate. But, they were planting the seeds for a breakup, which of course didn't happen because Triple H would tear his quad the next night on Raw. And next up we have Invasion, which was a very significant pay-per-view in WWE history, but perhaps not for the right reasons. It should have been the biggest pay-per-view in the history of WWE. When it was all said and done, it was a good show, but to me it could have been so much better, especially the main event. You had a very solid card, but it didn't really feel authentic. It felt like WWF guys that were playing the role of WCW star or ECW star rather than a real interpromotional battle. And that was a major flaw with the Invasion. It just didn't feel authentic. And, you had a bunch of interpromotional matches, Tajiri versus Taz, and then that sort of thing. So yeah. It could have been so much more than it was. The main event, the 5-on-5 match, it was an entertaining match, but the big storyline was Steve Austin in the weeks leading up to it, aligning himself with Team WWF, Vince McMahon needing the old Stone Cold back, and the angle they did for that was tremendous. But then they do the big match on pay-per-view, and Austin turns on Team WWF. Why does he turn on Team WWF? Because Vince gave Kurt Angle more hugs than him. That was his explanation. It was so stupid. And this whole match, the finish put a whole sour taste in my mouth for the entire show. And when I was thinking of Invasion, leading up to it, I was thinking maybe they'd have Goldberg show up, or they'd bring back some more WCW talent like Sting, and they would have done something really significant to get the Invasion angle off to a hot start, and maybe even get WCW their own TV show. Instead, we got a bunch of guys like the Dudley Boys jumping to ECW, and we're supposed to believe now they're part of ECW. The whole thing was ridiculous, and Austin going to WCW / The Alliance, which made no sense if you followed wrestling history. Why would he go back there after they fired him and he went to WWF and became a big star? Just no logical sense whatsoever. Next up we have Unforgiven. The most interesting thing about Unforgiven was the pay-per-view poster, which you can see on the screen in the background. This was the first WWF pay-per-view after 9/11. So I think because of that, WWE played it safe with this pay-per-view. There was nothing all that significant that happened, anything controversial. It was pretty by the numbers for a pay-per-view. The main event, Steve Austin versus Kurt Angle. On paper, it makes sense for Kurt Angle to win the WWE title in his hometown of Pittsburgh, but the way they did it to me was mind-boggling. Not only did he beat Austin clean, which is fine, I guess, if you want to give Angle that moment, but they had Angle tap out Austin. Steve Austin, the guy that did not give up at WrestleMania 13 against Bret Hart, all of a sudden now is tapping out. I mean, that is what happened to the Steve Austin character. That's how low he sank. to the point where he was tapping out. So, you know, it was just very disappointing what they did with the Austin character. And, you know, one of the worst pay-per-view matches of all time, you know, it has the reputation, Kane and Undertaker versus Chronic. And watching it back recently, I mean, wasn't a good match. I don't think it was the worst match of all time, but it certainly was very boring. And at the time, it was enough of a disaster to where WWE released Chronic much in similar fashion to when they let go of Buff Bagwell. So yeah, because it was such a bad match, somebody had to take the blame, and of course Undertaker and Kane, the loyal WWE guys, aren't going to get the blame for it. So, you know, and WCW continuing to look bad. You had The Rock beating Booker T and Shane McMahon in a handicap match. Poor Booker T, I mean, just losing pay-per-view after pay-per-view, and just being portrayed as a total joke. Edge versus Christian. Christian winning the IC title. This was the first one-on-one match between Edge and Christian, which was significant. And everything else on the show was pretty forgettable. Although I will say RVD and Jericho, hardcore title, that was a good match. And I also wanted to mention from Invasion, the best match on that pay-per-view was Jeff Hardy versus RVD. To me, that was definitely the highlight of that pay-per-view. So, you know, I forgot to mention that. Make sure you check out that match and check out RVD and Jericho on this pay-per-view. Moving on here to No Mercy 2001. This pay-per-view was decent. I mean, you had Steve Austin against Kurt Angle and RVD. RVD was outshining pretty much everybody on the Alliance side. He was becoming the star, really becoming the star of the company, and trying to overshadow Steve Austin, and Austin was getting pissed off. You know, RVD was a guy who marched to the beat of his own drum, and Austin did not like that. He wanted RVD to be a follower. I kind of liked the storyline a little bit if I wasn't so frustrated with Austin as a heel. But this was a good match. Jericho finally winning the big one from The Rock. This was an excellent match. I thought it was really good. The only negative is, of course, you had such a good match, and then you have Stephanie coming out and doing the outside interference and all that, leading up to the controversial ending. But Jericho did win the big one here, and this was very entertaining. You had a ladder match between Edge and Christian, which I thought was okay, but a step down from previous ladder matches that they had done as a tag team against the Dudleys and the Hardys. So yeah, overall, this was a decent show. Not great, not terrible, just very run-of-the-mill stuff. And then we had the Vengeance pay-per-view. A little bit confusing here because Vengeance was usually in July, but because of 9/11, they decided for this year to not use the Armageddon name, and they went with Vengeance instead. And then the following year, they would go back to Vengeance in July and Armageddon in December. Very confusing, but whatever. This pay-per-view is noteworthy for when Chris Jericho won the Undisputed title. Not just by beating one person, but he beat two. He beat Steve Austin and The Rock in the same night. Of course, both matches had tons of outside interference, but nonetheless, Jericho did win the Undisputed title and overcame all the odds to win. And I liked the backstage segments with Flair and Jericho. That was pretty entertaining. Looking at the rest of this card, it was fairly standard. Wasn't a big fan of the Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy match. Lita was a special referee, and basically she made a mistake and didn't see Matt Hardy's foot on the ropes. This whole storyline was lame, and you didn't know who to cheer for in this feud, and it just didn't work. And a few weeks later, WWE would go back to teaming these guys up again, and they did not learn their lesson, because almost a decade later they tried the feud again, and it still wouldn't work. People just didn't want to see the Hardys go against each other. Looking at the rest of this card, Undertaker beating RVD to win the Hardcore title. This was a pretty good match. I enjoyed this one of the better matches on this card. And that's really the only noteworthy things about this pay-per-view. Let's move on here to the first B pay-per-view of 2002, which was No Way Out. And for once, the NWO initials for the pay-per-view actually meant something, because the real NWO, the New World Order, Hogan, Hall, and Nash made their big returns to WWE as the NWO. But to me, this was really disappointing. You know, when they brought in the NWO, I figured that they would raise hell and they would create all this controversy just like the old days. But right from the get-go, it was very watered down. You had the three of them coming out and cutting a promo and being all civil and saying that they weren't there to cause trouble. Then why did you bring them in the first place? But later on, we'd find out, JR would try to say that he doesn't trust them and he really believes they're up to no good. But just felt weird that they would come out and just act like normal guys on the roster. They didn't feel like anything special. And you'd have the backstage segments with Austin and The Rock confronting the NWO. Funny stuff. I mean, especially The Rock's promo when he would make fun of Diesel and Razor Ramon. Although once again, The Rock, he's so entertaining, but the thing is sometimes he just makes his opposition that's supposed to be taken seriously look like complete fools. And that's basically what he did here. You had The Rock beating The Undertaker with help from Ric Flair, and that set up the Ric Flair-Undertaker match at WrestleMania. Kurt Angle beating Triple H with the WrestleMania title shot on the line. Of course, Triple H would get it back leading into WrestleMania. And you had Stephanie as the referee, and of course she was, trying to screw over Triple H. Very predictable stuff. The main event match, Jericho defending the world title, the undisputed title against Steve Austin. You had the NWO come out, and Austin was holding his own against the NWO, which was, very different from WCW, because when the NWO came out, they could beat up 7 or 8 guys, 3 against 7 or 8, and the NWO got over. But here, 3 guys could not even take one Steve Austin. But finally, Scott Hall hit the stunner on Austin, which was a terrible-looking stunner. And then you had Jericho pinning Austin to retain the title. And then the NWO came back out and beat him up some more, and then spray-painted him, and that was the end. So, in my opinion, it was a very disappointing comeback for the NWO. I just figured that they would be more of a force, and it would have more of an unpredictable feel. NWO and WWE just felt very subdued, and it didn't feel like a real invasion, much the same as when they had the invasion with the Alliance and the ECW. Didn't feel authentic. Alright, that'll wrap it up for my thoughts on the WWE B pay-per-views from Backlash 2001 through No Way Out 2002. Leave a comment, youtube.com/NoDQCAW, and subscribe. Check out the other pay-per-view review videos, and let me know what you think. What moments did you like? What moments did you not like from these pay-per-views? And stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in the world of wrestling. Thanks for watching.